So this sale to Fortis, to casual or outside observers, I would say, this came as kind of a surprise. Is this something that had been in the works for a long time?
The timing of the sale and the announcement is something that was a little bit beyond our control. As you know, I've only been at the company for about 3 months, but in the fall of last year, the company received an unsolicited offer to acquire the outstanding shares of Central Vermont. And the board of directors, as you know, its fiduciary duty, in the exercise of its fiduciary duty, had to analyze that offer. So what they did was actually engage an investment bank, the firm Lazard, and went through a process of contacting other parties that might be interested in acquiring the company to make sure that they were maximizing the value. If the company was going to be sold, they wanted to get the absolute top dollar for that. And through that process, which was very elaborate and thorough, and became quite competitive at the end, Fortis emerged as the clear winner, both on price and non-price terms. When everything was considered, they emerged as the clear winner. And you know, it's obviously a good deal for our investors, with a premium of more than $10 per share based compared to the closing price the Friday before we announced the transaction. But also a very good deal for our customers, in that there'll be substantial benefits for customers near term, in the sense that there'll be a $21 million pot of investments made, and the exact content of which is to be determined through the regulatory approval process. But there'll be, as a requirement of a prior Public Service Board order, we're going to be, Fortis is going to be putting up $21 million that wouldn't have been invested but for this transaction. And it could take the form of additional renewable energy. It could take the form of additional investments in energy efficiency or demand response programs, maybe something linked into our smart grid program. We're not sure yet, but it's something that's going to be beneficial to customers, and we're looking forward to working out the details of that with the Department of Public Service and other parties that are interested. In addition, customers are going to benefit down the road from the sharing of best practices. Fortis is a holding company that is very decentralized. So they have, if you look at their family of companies, they have maybe 7,000 employees across Canada and their properties that they own in the Caribbean. But their head office in St. John's, Newfoundland, has only 17 people in it. So their model is one that allows independence and autonomy for the local operating companies that they acquire. And but that model will allow us to share best practices with sister companies throughout Canada and the Caribbean as we go forward. And finally, in terms of customer benefits, we'll have access to capital that we wouldn't have had without this transaction. As you know, the electric transmission distribution business is very capital intensive, and you know, while Central Vermont has made it on its own for a long period of time, our bonds are just one notch above junk bond status. And last year, we needed to raise $30 million worth of equity. It took us the better part of a year to do that in very small increments throughout the year. Fortis brings us the ability to have greater access to capital markets, and something that will facilitate future investments down the road as we look to build the transmission and distribution system that our customers expect. So we're very excited about the transaction from our shareholders' perspective, our customers, and the communities we serve. And that goes back to the Fortis business model, where they operate independent, autonomous companies. So our name isn't going to change, our culture isn't going to change, our headquarters is going to remain in Rutland. The commitment that we've demonstrated to the communities we serve in the past is going to remain just as it has been. So it's we're very fortunate to have found such a good partner through the process.
You've given me a ton of information. I just want to circle back and touch base on a couple of the points that you had mentioned and have you elaborate on those a little bit. You had mentioned that when this unsolicited offer came, you did an analysis and made sure you were getting the best offer, and you mentioned Fortis emerged as a clear winner. So can I assume then that there were other companies that also had expressed an interest in buying CVPS?
Yeah, absolutely. There was quite an extensive array of companies, the details of which are all confidential, but you know, the parties that we entered into discussions with all signed confidentiality agreements with us and bilateral agreements, so we're really prohibited from disclosing any of the specific names and the specific details. But to get a sense, there were other strategic, other utilities, and also financial players that were interested in just making a financial investment were all part of the sale transaction process.
Can you say how many companies were?
Many, and we whittled it down to a few finalists, and Fortis emerged as the best.
Why was there an interest in buying CVPS?
Well, it's a very well-run company that has come a long way, and it's also kind of a nice size for companies to acquire. And I think that may have contributed to some of the competitive nature that we saw in the bidding process. It's a sizable investment for someone, including the debt. It's about $700 million that they're paying, but it's not billions and billions of dollars. So it's something that a large company, a well-capitalized company, can acquire without having to issue new stock, for example, or go too far into debt to make the acquisition. So I think it was a well-run company and an attractive size for a lot of potential investors.
CVPS is known throughout the industry as having one of the lowest rates in New England in terms of acquiring power. Will that change? And can you elaborate a little bit on what impact that will have for your customers? Your ratepayers, for example, largely don't really care where the power comes from as long as it's affordable.
Right.
Can you comment about how this deal will affect your residential, first of all, customers?
This won't increase rates in any way whatsoever. And in fact, over time, in addition to the $21 million of new investment that will be available, they'll provide other benefits to our customers that will lower prices or keep them lower than they would otherwise have been over time. For example, when we sign up for power purchase agreements right now, the party we're buying the power from looks at Central Vermont as a credit risk, and they look at our bond ratings, they look at the company's assets, and they require us to put up collateral. Now that we'll be part of a bigger, stronger, more financially solid company, we expect that those collateral requirements will be less, which will keep our cost of power down.
And what about for business customers, your large users, your large consumers of power?
Same thing. I mean, we buy the power for everybody at the same time, so they'll get the benefits as well in terms of the lower costs of capital and lower collateral requirements as we enter into new power contracts.
And your power purchase agreements aren't affected by who the owner of the company is?
No, this is a stock transaction. So all that's really happening is that our shareholders today, which are spread out all over the U.S. and the world, are trading in their stock for cash. And now we'll have one stockholder based in St. John's, Newfoundland. But that's really, it's at the stockholder level, not at the company management level. And I've probably mentioned this already, but what's really unique about this transaction is that Fortis is looking for the management company, the management of the company, to carry on and continue to do what we've been doing, continue to be responsive to the needs of our customers and the energy policy of the state of Vermont in terms of continuing to promote clean, renewable energy as part of our power supply mix.
And speaking of the shareholders, they must be very happy with.
Well, we haven't had the vote yet, but it was a very good premium. So I think they'll recognize that when it comes time for them to vote on the transaction.
What is the time frame for that?
Well, we're preparing a proxy statement now, which we expect to mail out to customers at the end of June or the beginning of July, and to be some time later this summer, we'll actually have a special meeting of our shareholders, probably in the August timeframe, that shareholders have been asked to vote on the transaction.
So this deal has not yet been finalized. What's your time frame for when that's expected to happen?
We're looking at 6 to 12 months for the whole transaction, and I've mentioned one of the key hurdles, which is the shareholder vote. That's critical. The other is regulatory approval, and we'll need regulatory approval from a number of agencies at the federal level and at state levels, but the most critical of which is the Vermont Public Service Board. That will be the most thorough review of that transaction, where we'll expect to demonstrate that this is in the public interest in moving forward. And so in terms of total time frame, we think it'll take 6 to 12 months. We come at that because by looking at the similar transaction a few years ago when GasNet from Montreal acquired Green Mountain Power. That transaction took 10 months from announcement to closing. And since this transaction is very similar with an out-of-state company acquiring the shares of an in-state company, We think, and we can do, and we'll be following that cookbook in terms of the process they went through and the issues that were reviewed as part of our filing with the Public Service Board. So we think we could probably do it a little faster. But that's really beyond our control. The Public Service Board will control that.
So there very much is a precedent set for this. Would regulatory approval largely just be a formality?
I wouldn't say that. I'd never say that, but it will be a thorough review. But it's we think we're squarely within the precedent of the existing case, so we'll have to go through that process and demonstrate to everyone who's concerned that this is a transaction that's in the public interest.
You mentioned this company is based in Newfoundland.
Yes.
Gasmet, obviously, another Canadian company buying GMP. What's the interest in Canadian companies purchasing Vermont utilities?
Well, I think maybe there's the proximity makes a little bit of a difference given we're on the border, but I wouldn't read too much into that. I mean, other utilities in New England, elsewhere, the company I used to work for, National Grid, is owned by an English company based in London, and Central Maine Power and Energy East with operations in Maine and upstate New York, and I think parts of Massachusetts. Formerly, I think they had properties in Connecticut, is owned by a Spanish company. So I think, it's a multinational business now, and I think big utilities are investing around the world.
Vermonters, in particular, I think, have a sort of embedded distrust of out-of-state or especially out-of-country owners. We've been seeing that with Vermont Yankee, owned by out-of-state, Entergy Louisiana, as the governor often refers to it. Should customers care about where their ownership is based, and does that factor at all in?
Well, I mean, what customers care about is up to them, but I can give everyone assurance that Fortis is different than Entergy. They are very much focused on local control of the utilities they acquire. And while we will have a foreign parent company, Central Vermont will stay. 7 of our 10 members of the board of directors will remain on the board of directors. And our headquarters will be based in Rutland. Our name won't change. Our culture won't change. Our really way of doing business won't change. So we're in a very fortunate situation where the Fortis business model of decentralized control of their operations fits very well with the Vermonters' preference for local businesses, because I think we will very much remain a local business with the benefits of access to capital that come from a stronger parent company.
So I'll probably ask this of Fortis as well, but from your perspective, what's in it for them if they're continuing to have keep control based here locally within the Vermont community? What's in it for Fortis? Why did they want to purchase this?
Fortis is making a very substantial investment in Vermont. They're spending on the order of $700 million, counting the debt that they're assuming responsibility for in this transaction. They're making, with that, a very long-term bet on the future of Vermont and the future of Central Vermont Public Service. And what's in it for them is the dividend stream and the earnings that we'll be able to generate from now to in the future. So instead of sending dividend checks every quarter to our shareholders scattered throughout the world, we'll send one dividend check to Fortis. And when we need capital, having to raise it from other people throughout the world who we sell new stock to, we'll raise it from Fortis. And so they're in it for the long haul. And what's very interesting, when you talk to them, you'll hear that they have this business model where they've been in existence for 20 or more years, but they have really ramped up their purchases and their acquisitions in the last 10 years, and they've left local control of their utilities. And they don't have a big head office. They have maybe 7,000 employees, but only 17 or so in their headquarters. So they really believe in the business model of that the utilities should be run locally, responsive to local needs and local issues.